Mambition! Woo!
Mambition! Hi, everyone.
Hello and welcome back.
It's Alex.
And Tiffany, trying to be normal. I think I have a voice in my head. As soon as we press record, it just forces me to say like really quirky things. I'm working on it.
Don't pretend you're normal the rest of the time.
I
Come
know.
on.
Oh dear, especially when we have a guest here. I've got to be fresh and normal. Hey,
Oh,
Belinda.
hello, how are you doing?
Good,
Yeah,
good.
we're good. We're good.
So today, guys, we've got Belinda Jane Batt. I'll tell you more about her. She's an accredited positive psychology coach, certified motherhood studies practitioner, maternal guilt expert, and speaker. Her debut book, Challenge Your Guilt: How to Flourish in Motherhood, Work and Life, will be published in spring 2025. On top of all that, Belinda is also a mum of 2 children. Woohoo, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are busy.
Excited. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
busy. I am quite busy,
yeah,
but we're all busy, aren't we, as mums?
I suppose so. So how's the book coming along?
It's pretty done. Yeah, tomorrow is my deadline to send it to my proofreader, and then it's out of my hands. It's going to layout and publishing. So yeah, it's done.
Exciting. How do you feel? Do you feel good now it's done?
I do. It's weird reading it back and knowing you can't change anything because you're told, at this stage you can only actually just do the things you've been told to change. So there's nothing else I can tinker with or even now I'm like, oh, there's something I could have said there, but it's done.
Oh, that's
Wow.
always the way. And no, it's like a job interview, isn't it? Where you come out of it and think, oh, I wish I'd said that. But nobody
Exactly.
reading it knows that you wish you'd said that.
Exactly. No, I am happy with it. Yeah, it's been a labour of love. So here we are.
How long have you been
into the
writing
world.
it?
Well, I say it's been a labour of love. I've done it very intensely over the last 12 months.
Okay.
Since deciding to do it, I sort of down tools with a lot of other stuff and just said I'm just going to focus on it and do it. So it's
It's like
done.
a go hard or go home situation. Just get
Exactly.
it done.
Exactly. So we
I
went
think,
hard. Thank
no, I
God.
think it's exciting. I actually respect anyone who has children and is writing a book. I just think how, because I think about like the cognitive like requiring. I mean, there's just this morning I was trying to do like a LinkedIn post and I had to do it in my laptop in my hand like this, race because my daughter was trying to like
Mash the keys.
yeah, every time you have a computer around, I feel like a child's always bothering you. They're just in that specific moment. So I'd love to know, like, how did you actually like? Did you like lock yourself in a room? Was it like that?
I did, yeah. You've just got to use all those hours when they're actually in childcare and school.
Okay.
Those hours become so much more precious, and become much better at just saying like the washing can wait, the beds can wait, everything has to, like normally that thing when you're working at home and you have this constant feeling of just wanting to just quickly do something, just quickly put something on. I've been challenging that anyway because of the whole concept of like the patriarchy and like how we all need to be using our time more efficiently and not just doing motherhood tasks and all of this kind of stuff. But with the book, it's like I actually really need every minute of that time. So yeah, a bit of discipline.
No, I
Have you
love
been getting?
that.
Oh, go ahead,
Oh,
Tiffany.
no, go
I
ahead,
was
go
going to
ahead.
say, have you been getting up super early and like doing that, or have
No,
you just been
do you
doing it
know
normal?
what? I don't know how people do this. Get up at 4, 5 o'clock to have some me time. Like that's not me. I hate getting up in the mornings. I am not a very nice person before I've had my coffee. And it's just about what I can manage to get up and get the kids up and get them to school. And like my husband works away most weeks, so I'm on my own.
Okay.
At least 3 or 4 mornings a week, I'm on my own. So there's no way I could have written before that. My brain doesn't start working till after 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. So no, I'm more of a night owl actually. But even that, you don't want to be sitting up writing till 11 o'clock. So you've just got, try and use that golden time in the middle of the day when you've got no children around.
Yeah. But it's interesting. I think it's interesting what you learn about time when you choose something in terms of, okay, you said, I'm writing a book, right? And then you had to sort of tailor your life and decisions around it. And I'm sure before you wrote, you probably thought, probably don't really have time to write a book.
Yeah, that's true. And there's something about, setting those deadlines in the day to day, like even when you're running your own business, you sort of just set deadlines, but then you don't always necessarily stick to them. And, this process has been very like, if you don't do this by this date, the book's not happening. So it's kind of like there is no leeway on those deadlines. But when you work for yourself, you're a bit more like, oh, well, I didn't do this today. Maybe I'll do it tomorrow. And So yeah, it's good discipline. I'm not always that disciplined, so it's been a real learning curve in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Was it the publisher then? Did they hold you to certain dates and time frames to submit things?
Yeah, so I'm actually been working
Okay.
with a US based publisher, and a friend of mine published her book with them and was really impressed. So they're called Manuscripts Press, and it's been kind of like a 12-month program. Really, it's almost like doing a uni course or something, where you basically get, like, along the way you get paired up with different editors and held to account, and there's a ton of accountability, which is just the best. Because there's all those moments when you just think, I can't, and I'm just never going to do it. And then you've just got someone like, okay, so you're going to deliver this by Friday, right? And you're like, okay, yeah.
And once you said yes, you feel like
Yeah.
you've got to do it.
And you're looking at your kids like throwing food against the wall and, like, trying to kill each other. And you're like, yeah, no, that's absolutely fine.
Yeah, no, I'm always interested, I think, in like the discipline that comes with making a decision rather than the decision that comes with the discipline. Because I think I remember I read somewhere, someone, I didn't know who it was, but many, many, many years ago, they were like, they had to write a book and they would like lock themselves in a room and not be allowed, like, you can't let me out, sort of thing. So it's always interesting, like the things people have to do to achieve their goals and like just how extreme sometimes we have to go to, but you still find a way to make it work, despite everything that you've got going on. So well done, Belinda. I think that's incredible.
Oh, thank you.
What
Yeah.
did you do? Did you set yourself like targets of a certain amount of words that you had to do, or did you do it by sections? Like, I'm really interested in the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, like, first of all, there was the planning phase, which was when you actually think about the structure of the book and, like, you get all the chapters sorted out, and then it was just literally get it all down. Because I've done my whole life, I've been writing or wanting to write and wanting to get published, but never actually really got to grips with the editing, how to edit. It was a real learning curve, but actually the key is to get it down in the first place, because when you're not so sure, when you have like really bad imposter syndrome, like so many people have, and you start doubting yourself, and you write a chapter and then you reread it and you want to just tinker with it and change it, but actually this process has been all about, and I've heard so many people talking about that, authors, saying just get the first draft down. It doesn't matter. If it's rubbish, it doesn't matter, but you have to do it all and then go back chapter by chapter and do it, edit it. So that's the discipline. The discipline is not correcting yourself as you go.
Yeah, because you'll never get it finished then, will you?
You'll never get it finished. You'll never will, because they will always, if you're a perfectionist, which I think a lot of us are, you'll never be happy with it. You'll never be happy enough to move on, to the next chapter. So you've just got to get it down.
And did you have to be like no distractions, quiet room, or like what's your...
I think...
Can you tell a listen to a podcast that's called like the writers something or other, and it's like it's all the writers room, it might be called. It's a good podcast, but they talk about like they talk about their process, but they talk about like what their room's set up like.
Oh God, no! I'm not even going to show you this room. I'm not
Oh
even
yeah,
gonna
you're
show
like
you this room.
no.
I did. I was on a call with someone the other day, and she was like, "Oh, it looks so nice in your office." And I lifted up the laptop, and I was like, and she was like, "Oh, right, yeah, no."
That's why I've got a fake background on. I am surrounded by washing.
Are you? Oh, it looks lovely. Yeah, no, I think it's just nonsense with kids. You don't. There's never quiet time. When they're at school and nursery, yeah, maybe. But I mean, even recently, we've had days when one of them's been sick, and you've got a deadline to meet, and so it's just wall-to-wall TV, challenging the whole guilt thing. Like, okay, you're going to watch TV for 6 hours today, and I'm going to...
Oh, on that note, I recently got up this morning with an inspiration that the kids are watching less TV because the American pediatrics, the group of, I'm guessing, men that come together and make these decisions because their wives are home looking after the kids. I've said apparently children under 2 should not watch any TV, and kids, I think between 2 to 6 shouldn't be more than an hour. And I was like, I think we're ×5 in that at the moment. So, we're working on that recently, but should be interesting.
Although, do you know what? I've got so much to say about that. But I would always say, like, when people say should, it's like, you just have to think about all of the massive challenges that mothers have in their day, and parents, but especially mothers have in their day to day. Like, you can, in an ideal world, we wouldn't, but there are many reasons why we sometimes have to, and
I mean, so I couldn't put Ted down when he was a baby, he either, I mean, I could very occasionally, like even when I went in the shower, I took him in a bouncy chair into the bathroom.
I did that.
Because it was the only way to shower. I couldn't put him down in a cot and leave the room. He would have gone ballistic. So we had a jumperoo in the corner of our living room, and so that I could cook a meal at sort of tea time, I used to put him in the jumperoo and put Dougie on, and he used to just like sort of bounce and watch Dougie, and I felt really bad about it at the time.
Did Dougie rate him?
The other option was to have him in a sling while I cooked, and I just thought, I can't do that. I can't do that.
No, do you know, I did the same. And actually, now I think about it, that would have been a good anecdote for the book, because my son used to go. My son used to go in a bouncer, and I used to put what do you call it? What's that? In the night garden.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, we love that.
And he would just loved it, and he would just bounce around exactly the same while I was cooking or whatever. I didn't feel any guilt about that then. Like,
I probably didn't at the time. I probably thought like, thank God I'm not holding him. Like, thank God.
Well, I think I think you definitely have to do what works for you. I think for me it's more just like maybe it's me making more effort. I want to actually, I think something I want to do, and just the consciousness around maybe because I work from home, and I think it's more me thinking about that I do work from home. So can I kind of make that time more, just something a bit different for them, and break up the TV, because they can watch for 5 hours in a row, and it's quite a lot.
well, this is the thing actually, and that is something I touch upon in the book, the screen time, because I think it's a big issue for a lot of mums. But I kind of tie it into our values as parents, and I think when I think about screen time, I think for me personally, if my kids are watching, if it's been half an hour they've been on their screens, like I honestly, that for me is just like a breather, and I feel no guilt at all. But it's incremental, and it's, you know, if it's an hour, like probably okay. If it comes into an hour and a half, and also particularly what they're watching, you know, is it back-to-back 5-minute episodes that are like making their brain go crazy, or is it a film, which is probably much easier for them to process because it's one, anyway, all that stuff. But I link it to and I talk about this fundamentally, really this is the key thing that I talk about with mums, is that make sure you're thinking about what the guilt is that you're feeling, and if it's helpful guilt or unhelpful guilt. You know, helpful guilt is when you feel guilt and it's actually encouraging you to align yourself better with your values and prompt some kind of positive behavioural change. Or is it unhelpful guilt, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, which is more like societally driven? You're feeling bad because society is telling you that you're doing everything wrong and you're bad. And I think with screen time, for me, a lot of the time that is helpful guilt, and because when it gets to a certain point, it tips over into, you know, is this good for my family? Is this good for my children's health? As family, as in connection, you know. So sometimes I'll be like, oh God, it's been an hour and a half. I haven't even looked at what they're watching. I put on 3 loads of washing. I've cooked the dinner, and I'm scrolling through my Instagram. But actually, what are the kids doing? Do you know what I mean? And that's when I think, actually, yeah, we haven't connected for an hour and a half, and I know that it's not good for their brains to just be watching endless episodes of blah, blah, blah. So I actually think a lot of the time screen time guilt can be more of the helpful kind of guilt, because it's actually often just reminding us, like, maybe just check, you know, maybe just check and realign this with your values a little bit. So I kind of use that quite a lot as an example of the helpful kind of guilt.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
Similar to you, Tiffany, I think the same. So we started screen time relatively early because Ted had an operation and we needed to keep him still in hospital. So he had a tablet he had the operation around his first birthday. So we had a tablet for him that we bought specifically for hospital. But we, at that point in time, would only let him watch something educational or aesthetically pleasing, or that we didn't mind. And now Peppa Pig has snuck in there, whereas she was sort of not on the radar for a long time. It was mainly Dougie, which we thought was funny, alpha blocks, number blocks, stuff like that. But we've kind of let that go by the wayside. And the other day he said something along the lines of, see the description box below, when he was doing some crafting, as though he was making his own YouTube video. I wasn't recording it. He was just talking like a YouTuber. And he's only 4, just turned 4, and I was like, okay, probably like need to roll back on YouTube and be more intentional about what he's watching again. I mean, I wouldn't say he's not a child to sit still for very long. So he'll watch it for a bit, but then he'll come and say, will you play? So for me, I feel more guilt around like playing and feeling like if I'm in the house, I have to be playing all the time. And if I'm not, then I feel guilty about that. But obviously I have adult stuff to do as well that doesn't involve pretending to be part of the solar system or being in a rocket. So yeah, I feel guilty that he wants to play and he doesn't have siblings. So I feel like I should be playing all the time.
That's such a common feeling. I've spoken to so many mums that feel that sense of guilt. But I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not a player. I don't
enjoy
playing.
it. Let's just put it out there.
I remember reading something a couple of years ago about this, saying that often when our kids are like begging and begging and begging for us to play with them, you know, they just want our attention. And this was I don't know where this was, I can't cite it, but I know I was really interested when I found it, because I'm not someone that enjoys playing particularly. And what the research said was that if you actually just play, or not even play, but if you just give them 15 minutes of really intentional, you know, just be with them and really concentrating on them and focusing on them for 15 minutes, they almost always will just wander off and start playing on their own again. So it's actually really interesting, because what they don't really need or want you to play with them for, you know, hours on end. They just want your attention. So giving them your undivided attention for 15 minutes, whatever that may be,
run off.
it satisfies that need without you actually having to spend hours playing. And that was a game changer for me, because I just don't feel guilty about not really playing. You know, I'll play like a game with them, but I won't play 15 games in a row, or, you know. So that was really good for me, because I just try and give them, okay, they want something, they need something, like give them
really
a bit of attention.
Helpful, because it's like putting a boundary in there. Rather than feeling like you should be doing it. And like you say, they probably will wander off after that amount of time.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
It's not that I mind spending time doing stuff, but it's specifically the playing that I find hard. Whereas if I'm doing craft with him or baking, then I don't mind that. But even then, he probably wanders off at about the 15-minute mark, and I'm left continuing to craft alone at the table.
Well, I have to admit, I really, really despise crafting. So for me, like that's even worse than playing. And the other day, I had a bit of my own guilt around that. There was a World Book Day competition, and they were doing this crafting thing. And, you know, I just had a moment when I thought, oh God, I really should, which is awful for me, because I'm all about turn your shoulds into coulds, and, you know, don't.
Then do you feel guilt about?
Yeah,
I'm
don't
feeling
feel
guilt.
And I just had a moment. I thought, oh God, you know, just because you hate crafting so much, like you don't want to instill this hatred of crafting in your children. So again, it may have been a bit of a values based exercise. I said to my son, we're making a scene from Harry Potter, and he was like, what? And I said, we're making a scene from Harry Potter, and he was like, okay. Like, didn't really want to, and then I just I made him. I was like, 2 toilet rolls, 2 potatoes, let's go. We're going to make Harry Potter.
Enjoy this.
Yeah, we're going to make Harry Potter in the Chamber of Secrets. And he was just like,
oh dear, that sounds lovely.
We did it, and I don't have to craft for a long time. I'm not going to craft for a good another couple of years now, so I've sort of ticked that one.
No, I am anything to do with like creating things. I'm going to leave that to my husband. I think I don't mind doing like the English and the maths and stuff like that. That's like not needing necessarily like a creative, you know, sort of approach. Anything creative, like building, like no, I'm going to leave that to him. I'd love to know though, Belinda, I think, why did you choose like guilt as the thing you wanted to study?
Interesting question. So I knew I wanted to go back to psychology. I did an undergraduate degree in psychology when I was, you know, really young, and really didn't really care about academic like success at all. I didn't know what else to do, just chose to do that. And I mean, I enjoyed it, but I wasn't like that into it, you know, as a subject. But then as the years went on, I was always so fascinated by psychology, and I went off and worked in PR and marketing and got completely went down that rabbit hole for a good couple of decades. And then I actually just started studying for my master's degree. I think I started a year before I got pregnant with my son. So I wanted to go back to psychology. I think I said this to you, Tiffany, when we spoke before. I was I was projecting into the future and thinking, if I want kids, I don't think that this industry that I'm working in is going to be very favourable for it. And I had that sense that I needed to be doing something else. So I kind of thought, I've always wanted to go back to psychology. Maybe I'll look. Anyway, long story short, I found this master's degree, which was positive psychology and coaching. And really, it was more the psychology element that was of interest to me. But when I started doing it, I thought, oh my God, coaching, like that's perfect. You know, I can't think of anything I would like to do more. But then mid-degree, I got pregnant, and I paused the degree, had my son, and I just experienced so much guilt in that first year of having him, that when I went back to finish the degree and do my dissertation, I thought, well, why don't I make guilt the topic of my dissertation? So I did like qualitative analysis and interviews with 5 mums who were in the first year of motherhood, and it was just really interesting because obviously I was going through it myself as well. So yeah, it was, and touching on what you said, Alex, my son had a lot of respiratory issues when he was young. So a lot of the guilt sort of was around some of those things, like the amount of steroids he had and all the inhalers he had, and did he need them or didn't he need them, and what, you know, was it our fault, was it not our fault, you know, all of those kind of things.
Completely empathise with all of that.
Yeah, it was hard, like really, really hard. I think if you've had a child, yeah, I mean, it was never, thank God, it was never death's door kind of territory. But when you've had a child who's suffered from, you know, anything like that when they're really small, it's really hard not to blame yourself, or just to ask yourself if you could have done things differently.
Yeah.
Along the
I
way.
definitely asked myself, like, well, I asked the consultant when they were telling us what was the matter with it. So this was while I was pregnant. I said, is it because of my age? And I knew it probably wasn't, but I still had to ask that question because I was like 37 at that point, going to be 38 just after he was born. And I definitely felt guilty about that. And I also felt a lot of guilt around people always go, oh, it's not good for them to have too many x-rays. And I was like, oh, God, this poor child's had so many. And he has like had a CT scan, which is like doses and doses of radiation within 24 hours of being alive. So, you know, I basically, when he's had to go for an x-ray because he hurt his wrist, I was like, meh, what's one more x-ray? But I people often say things like that then trigger your own guilt of like, oh, well, I don't want them to have an x-ray unless it's really necessary. Yeah. But then you have to pull yourself back and think, it was necessary, though.
Exactly.
You can't feel guilty about it.
Yeah, you have got to do that. I think where I live, I absolutely love living in Totnes, but there are a lot of people here that are quite alternative, and they're, you know, thinking about health, and that was quite triggering for me when I moved down here, because we were sort of still in that phase of him being sick a lot, going to hospital less. I think when we first year or two of his life, he was just in hospital probably like once a month or something. We'd end up in hospital with, you know, some kind of breathing thing, and but when we came down here, he was just sort of starting to level out, and I went to an essential oils event, and someone just made this really throwaway comment to me about, you know, you could manage his condition with oils. You don't need, you know. And I was just like, sorry, what?
What's your medical qualification?
Yeah, but you know, I'm sort of
oils.
I've got a lot of, don't get me wrong, right? I've got a lot of oils. When my kids are sick, they've got their bedrooms.
One of those.
I've got like, I'm diffusing 50 things at the same time. Like I'm running around like I've got everything. But I was just, it was really funny how that got under my skin, because I just like, I kind of like shrugged it off and was like, don't be ridiculous. But it really made me think, you know, and I started thinking, oh my God, you know, he's been taking steroids for years, and maybe we could have done something differently. Like maybe we shouldn't have been giving him all this stuff. You know, I used to obsessively check the height and weight charts, you know, because I was convinced that we had stunted him. Even though there was no evidence to show that, I was convinced that we stunted him. So obviously when that comment was made, I was just kind of like, oh my God, like maybe we really have done him damage. But do you know what? I look back now, and this whole thing with challenging our guilt, we did everything that we could possibly have done that we thought was best for him.
Yeah.
You know,
But
you do, as a parent, as a mother, of course you do. That's your priority, and yeah, maybe we haven't always made the right decisions, but there were times when he was really poorly, and we just made that call, you know. And you trust the medical profession, and
exactly, that's what
I don't feel guilt about it now. I really don't, because I do it all over again, because it got us to where we are now, you know, where he's actually, you know, really relatively healthy. But yeah, those things get under your skin.
No, I can imagine. I think people can be so thoughtless about comments, and I think I don't know if it's like also as mothers we kind of we take everything in, and we really do think about what people say sometimes because of the guilt is there. So it's like they trigger it almost. I did learn something from you though, from when we from when we spoke. You were talking about that, like the evolutionary purpose of maternal guilt. I thought that was interesting. Could you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so that was one of the first things I learned when I was doing sort of researching it, was that there's this evolutionary reason why mothers may feel more guilt, which is related to, back in the days, trying to make sure that your offspring survive. If you experience guilt, then it means that you're more likely to nurture your children and keep them close to you, physically present, with you. And so there is this argument that, or at least in the research that I found, there was this argument that there's an evolutionary reason why mothers are predisposed to feeling guilt, because it actually sort of optimizes the chances of your offspring's success. So at a base level, that is a reason why, yes, okay, evolutionarily wise. But, the challenge, I think, for modern mothers, and I think the word is modern here, is that so much has changed. The landscape has changed. Like, we don't live in caves anymore. We don't, we're not all sitting at home not working and watching our husbands going off, to work or to war, or, everything is different. And so many more mothers are going out to work and having to work to make ends meet, or God, actually, to be honest, we're all over the place at the moment because the childcare costs are so high that we don't know if we can afford to put our kids in childcare or whatever. But there is so much guilt that is being forced upon us because the changes have happened, but the systems and the society, have not evolved alongside these changes. So, loads of women are now working, but the systems and structures have not changed at all. We're still working in a very patriarchal society, and even the 9 to 5. I mean, it's a throwback to another world where it was mainly men going out to work, and they could be there from 9 until 5, and there weren't all these childcare commitments. And so we have to look at the system that we're working in and understand that this is where I talk about the unhelpful guilt, is that modern mothers are trying to survive. Let's face it, survive in a society where nothing is fit for purpose for us anymore, and when we have to ask for flexible working, so because, take a step back, it's still mainly women that are the primary caregivers, the default parent. Even when we go back to work after maternity leave, it's majority women that are doing that. And then I think the stat is that there's we're still doing, or most of us are still doing 3 times as much at home, alongside the work, alongside everything else. So we are feeling guilt because we are trying to do it all and keep up with all of the societal expectations on us. But the reality is we can't do it all, because it's never been possible. It's certainly not possible now. It's only getting worse. And so my argument, I guess, really is just to say, look, we need to really be aware of what is happening here, because we're feeling this guilt, but this guilt is not ours to carry. It's the system that should change. It's not us. And actually what we need to do is understand where the guilt is helpful and where the guilt is not, and learn to reject the unhelpful guilt, because it's only in having that cognizance of when it's unhelpful and when it's societally driven, and being like, actually, I can't, this is stupid, I can't do this. Like, why am I trying to do all this? Why do I feel so guilty because I can't do it? Because I can't do it, so I'm not going to feel guilty about it anymore. I'm just gonna, I mean, it sounds easy, but it's just having, I think that there's just this importance of having this awareness of why we're feeling guilty, and that we have a choice in how we respond to that guilt, how we respond to those feelings. We just need to be a bit more aware, I think, of where, and something I like to say with my clients is, who is this, like, where is this guilt coming from? What is the voice that is speaking to you in? Is it your voice? Is it really something that is about you aligning with your values, or is it society's voice, or your employer's voice, or some older person in your family's voice? Or, do you know what I mean? Identify where that voice is really coming from, and actually, if it's not aligning with your values, then just say, no, I'm not listening to that voice, because times have changed and it's different for modern mothers now. So we don't, we've got to stop being trapped in this cycle of toxic guilt and shame because we can't achieve something which is absolutely unachievable in the first place.
Wow.
Yeah, we have been really fed that myth of having it
Sorry.
all. Big
No,
sigh there.
Seriously, please, we need this. No, we all need to hear this. We know that.
It is really helpful. I think the idea that you can, the awareness is kind of the first step. Although the more that we talk about kind of society and things on here, the more I'm kind of like, I see where the trad wives are coming from, because we're ending up with the worst of all worlds. Like, yes, you can have a career and we're meant to feel grateful for that, like that we don't have to stay at home. But really, what you said, Belinda, about having to work, for most people, it's not a choice. It's not a choice they're making. They have to work to be able to afford to live. But then they're carrying all of their childcare, being the primary carer, and having to do all of the work at home as well. So to me, we really do need to do something to challenge the system. But while that happens, being able to feel less of the guilt about it and push that back on society makes so much sense. I mean, I'm definitely getting radicalised by talking to people, like going to be one woman protesting through the streets of London, I think, at some point. But yeah, I think
Yeah, I'll join you.
I'll join you as well, definitely.
3 women
I'm not alone.
But, I think that it's so helpful. And how do you manage to... So you've got that awareness. What's the next step? So how do you then separate the two different kinds of guilt?
Okay, so yeah, it is important. So obviously the awareness and the societal systems need to change and all that. That is like fact, and it's hard to argue that. But I think on the day to day, it's also really important to take responsibility for ourselves. I think something which I think is really important to note is the ways that we perpetuate the system itself. So actually, since I've been doing this research, I've noticed a lot in my own relationship and our family setup, certain ways that I kind of perpetuate the whole, patriarchal setup kind of without even really meaning to, because there's this real social conditioning element of how girls are socially conditioned into becoming mothers and boys are socially conditioned into, that there's the link between between girl and family and boy and work, and the ways that these things play out. And I think we need to really ask ourselves very truthfully and honestly, in what ways is my own social conditioning, or the social conditioning, societal conditioning that's all around me, playing into my own family setup, because this does relate to guilt, the amount of guilt that I feel, and I need to look at the ways that it's playing out. So one example which I give in the book and talk about a lot is maternal gatekeeping. So and I think a couple of the experts that I spoke to we were sort of talking about this. It's like mothers, often we adopt the role in our houses of being kind of like project managers. It's like even when we have equal relationships, and actually really, really supportive partners who really want to be involved and really are, trying to be equal, we're often, actually, I would say, in my case, often probably still, we're playing out this role of project manager. So we're not actually enabling. We're saying, right, and the next task you need to do is this, and the next task you need to do is this. And what that does is it doesn't actually take things off our plate really at all, because we're still the ones that are holding all the to-dos, and we're still the one, like I've used this example a million times, but my husband might be giving the kids a bath, right? And he will say to me, I'll do bath time tonight, or I'll do bath time and bedtime, you go and chill, and I'm like, okay. And then I'll go to the living room. Literally 5 minutes later, I'm like, he hasn't got the toothbrushes, he hasn't got the he hasn't taken this, he hasn't taken that, he hasn't got the nappies. And so you're just running around like in the background, kind of like dropping nappies outside bathroom doors and just pushing pajamas through the slot. and it's so funny. I mean, it is funny really, but it's also like, why am I doing this? Because he actually I've talked to him about it, and he's like, it's so disempowering, you know, when I'm in charge, I'm meant to be in charge, but you're still doing stuff, which is his perception of looking at it. But from the other side, it's like, I'm also not giving myself a break, you know, I'm not, and it's fun. And it may not sound like it directly feeds into guilt, but it does, because we need to be looking at the ways, and also what does it say to our kids? You know, mummy's the one that is running around doing everything. You know, no wonder we feel guilty when the balls get dropped, because we're always the ones that are managing everything. And if something gets dropped, it's, you know, we take it on ourselves as being our fault. So I think there is that kind of narrative of within the home of like, equality needs to be real equality. Like, we need to be empowering our partners, you know, if we have them, to genuinely do things equally. And I think, you know, things like that are quite important. But then on the other side, so there's behaviours, socially conditioned behaviours that we're playing out that we may not even realise that we need to sort of check ourselves. And then the next thing is just, you know, self-care, blah, blah, blah. You know, we all know about self-care and how we never have any time to do it and all the rest of it. But, you know...
And then really you can feel guilty about that.
Yeah,
I'm not doing my self-care.
We feel guilty about everything. But there is... it's really important to try and equip ourselves with some kinds of tools and coping mechanisms, you know, on the day-to-day. I think things like, you know, the power of the pause, you know, like pausing, trying to sort of take a step back and realize, actually, often what I tell myself is about role modeling to my children, you know, how they want, you know, how it's important to role model self-care. Because if I don't role model that I'm looking after myself and I'm just run ragged the whole time, then it's not going to be a very good role model to my kids. That's the one that resonates the most, right? Because actually, if you're like, oh, you can't pour from an empty cup, and it's so important to stay mentally well and physically well, but you know, actually, that stuff falls on deaf ears when you're constantly just kicking yourself for not being good enough, and you can't reach these hallowed perfect motherhood standards that has been set for us by society. You know, when you're constantly kicking yourself, it's actually really hard to think, I do deserve that massage. I really do deserve that cup of tea. You know, it's easier to think along the lines of how you're role modeling to your kids, you know, the importance of actually caring for yourself. And the other thing I think about as well is, if I burn myself out, what impact will that have on my family? You know, I can't sustain this level of constant like franticness and not being able to achieve and feeling like I'm failing at everything. I can't sustain that. I'm gonna burn myself out. So, you know, I really need to sort of take a step back, and, you know, and that's, for me, that's where all my positive psychology stuff comes in. It's like, a lot of it sounds really trite, and, you know, you've heard all the really classic ones like, oh, gratitude and stuff, but you know what, this stuff really does work. I mean, it's crazy what an impact it can have if you actually do some of these interventions intentionally and regularly and mindfully. You know, so there's quite a few. The gratitude is one that everyone knows, but there's quite a few, you call them like what you will, positive psychology exercises, interventions, whatever you call them, that can be really helpful at promoting our well-being. And so that is another really important pillar. It's, you know, it's the awareness of the societal issues, which will take a long time to overcome, but for God's sake, let's try. And then there's this sort of, how is this playing out in my own household in ways that I can seek to change? And then there's and what am I doing to actually bolster my well-being?
I like that. Yeah, I love the idea of, because I really like the idea of starting with the end in mind, because I think on a day-to-day basis, the reality is that it always sounds like a nice idea, but I think when I personally, and it sounds like something you do as well, I think when we start about from the overall impact, and maybe when they're more likely to take action, because I love the idea that, you know, if we don't model it to our children, what will they then kind of become as a consequence of what they've seen, right? And when I think about my daughter and her potentially being this, like, you know, kind of chaotic version of me, that sounds quite sad. So I'm definitely more likely to do something different if I think of it like that. And I think also this idea that when you do burn out as well, you can't be there for your family. You can't actually look after your children. You can't. pour into your cup is a way of you then having something to pour back out to them. And I think that's more likely to, for me anyway, change my behavior more so than kind of the day to day. Because in the day to day, it's just too busy to even think about being conscious about what you're doing.
Do you know what? I also came across a really interesting study. I think it was in the Harvard Business Review, that actually found that mothers who who engaged in acts of self-care had, like, their children had better outcomes. So when they got to school age or something. So it was actually like, the implication of that is that when your children see you taking care of yourself, they internalize that, and that plays out in a positive way in their own lives. So again, that's a real motivator for me, because it's kind of, it's instilling these values that will take them through their lives, which is really important.
I mean, I am definitely a better parent. Like, I try and be patient anyway, but I am much more patient and less likely to be snappy or grumpy when I'm not exhausted and when I've had the time to myself. And I can hear when I am tired that I am probably a bit snappier than I would like to be. So I can see how that then reflects on the children, because if somebody's being snappy with you or whatever, you feel like you're walking on eggshells, and that's not a good way for anyone to feel. So yeah, by taking care of yourself, you are then able to be a better parent.
But, also, I think it's really important to talk about self-compassion, because, we touched on it just before we started recording, but the whole concept of rupture and repair was another game changer for me, massive. Can't remember where I read about it. It might have been Philippa Perry or one of her books.
I think it might be, actually.
I think it was that book. It was a real game changer, because I think that's the thing, is that we can't really stop these feelings of guilt coming up, because they will, because it's natural, it's human nature that we're going to feel like we've done something wrong. And, I think what's important is instead of, like, something goes wrong, we feel guilt, we beat ourselves up about the guilt, we feel bad from a personal point of view and a societal point of view because we're failing as mothers, blah, blah, blah. And then we internalize it and we decide that we're bad. And then we feel shame, which is really, really damaging. It's really important. Like, that's a real rabbit hole, that's a real spiral. And I think if you do that too often, you sit in shame, and that is a bad place to be. Nobody wants to be sitting in shame, believing that they're bad, that there's nothing you can do. It's hard to pull yourself out of that. So I think when you feel that guilt, which is, not as bad as shame, it's, guilt is I did something bad, shame is I am bad, all of that. When you feel that guilt, I think it's just, you need to have a bit of compassion for yourself and just think, bit of a reframe. I've snapped at him. I've had a really hard day. I am absolutely at my limit. But sometimes these things just happen. And if make sure you repair that rupture, whatever you do, get down at their level, say, Mummy snapped at you. Mummy's had a really long day. Mummy's sorry. Mummy's the grown up. Mummy knows that she shouldn't behave like that. But let it go, and then let it go, because it's so easy to take that away and just think, oh my God, like, I shouldn't have done that. What am I going to do? Have I damaged them for life? All this.
Like, better start saving for those therapies.
Oh God, yeah.
But actually, I think that it's just a normal part of life and parenting. And sometimes we do snap, because this is the other thing. We're human. And humans make mistakes, and show me a mother that has not lost their temper, behaved in probably a terrible, way. God forbid anyone actually sees us sometimes in our own homes. But at the same time, we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can. And sometimes you just have to let it go. And if 99% of the time you are, absolutely, maybe not nailing it, but like doing a pretty good job, like good enough is good enough.
Yeah.
And then 1% of the time you just lose your rag, and as long as you repair the rupture, it's not the end of the world. Our kids are more resilient. That's a whole nother topic, but they're more resilient than we give them credit for.
Yeah, I was about to say that. I think they are more resilient, and I think sometimes we need to give them the opportunity to kind of discover that resilience. Like, for example, I mean, even recently, my son going into nursery, so they have a section where they take their shoes off and take their bags off, and this got to a point where at the beginning we would take them in, take their shoes off, take their coats off, and then they started saying, kids do it themselves. But sometimes some parents would go in And I just kind of let him go and kind of figure it out. Even if he's kind of squashed in between someone, I'm like, it will it will escape. It'll figure it out, unless it's bad, right? But the other day, my mother-in-law was like, oh, this was squashed, now I have to go in and save him. I actually thought that's not always a good thing, because I think unless he's really, really trapped and like hurt himself, I think sometimes we're so quick to save them. But actually, as we go through life, it builds confidence when people make mistakes, and when people kind of find themselves in not absolute fatal situation, but bad situation, they can find their way out. But yeah, I'm definitely learning that loving them doesn't require like the cotton wool approach. Sometimes let them sort of fail or fall, and then help them to come back up again. But yeah, that resilience needs to be discovered.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of the reason why mothers particularly feel guilt is because of all of these sort of toxic ideologies, like, attachment theory and intensive parenting ideology and all of this stuff, which is
already ruined them by the time they're
yeah,
a year old.
It's funny, because it's not funny, but attachment theory and intensive parenting ideology are very much rooted in our like collective consciousness. And I think there's this a lot of these theories have been largely discredited in a number of ways, like particularly attachment theory, that it has to be the mother all the time, like close to the child, otherwise the child will never never thrive. And intensive parenting, this idea that the mother exists to serve the child. The mother's entire purpose is to make sure that her child is happy and all their needs are fulfilled. And these ideologies are really harmful, and I think, and they are a part of our history, and they have embedded themselves in our culture, and they're a big part of the reason why we feel like it's our responsibility to pick up our children when they fall, and it's our responsibility to make sure they never feel any negative emotions, and it's our responsibility, to coddle them as much as possible. And that is, I think those are a big part of the reason why that it feels like, as mothers, that we are always the ones that have to be responsible for our children's happiness, and it's interesting the way that's played out, and I think it feeds into this guilt and shame cycle, because we really do believe fundamentally, because of the way we've been conditioned and all of these theories and all this stuff that's been flying around, we really do fundamentally believe that it is our responsibility.
But also how we stigmatizing dads. Yeah, I think it stigmatizes dads as well, because I see it sometimes, like how it's like in my head I'm trying to like you said, it's my job, and it's like I defend this family and these children, but I wonder sometimes how that must look like for my husband in kind of playing like this second role, and also the stigma around even dads wanting like paternal leave, how it's been so shocking to people, like, oh my God, so you want more from life than to be a dad and not have a full-time career? I mean, there was a man from, was it Goldman Sachs, I don't know which bank, who asked for parental leave, and his like boss actually bullied him, like, because they thought, why would you do that? So I think I wonder if all the way that we're looking at guilt and carrying the guilt and carrying that project manager role then stigmatizes dads to kind of feel like they are secondary, and it pushes them out the picture, and it makes them
And I think that's a really key point, and I think that we as mothers will never feel less guilt unless the playing field is leveled and the whole system is changed in a way that is more supportive of fathers and mothers. That's a great example, the parental leave. It should be I think it's Jessica Chivers, who I interviewed for my book, said that it should be the case that when a man or a woman says that they're going to have a child, the employer doesn't actually know whether it's going to be the man or the woman that goes. Obviously, like in the first few weeks, it's got to be the woman, right? Because biology. But there should be a much greater kind of culture within organisations whereby it's almost just as likely that men might take a few months as it is that women. And when these changes really start filtering through, women will feel less guilt, because the responsibility is genuinely shared. It's not like a token. It's not like something that companies just throw in as a tick box exercise. It's something that's really like built from the ground up, and it's not women versus men. It's all of us working together in a way that makes everyone feel better.
Well, it's more freedom, isn't it? Really, we should be in the position where that choice comes from the couple.
Yeah.
and they make that choice themselves as to who is going to take what element of leave. I think I've said this before. It makes it really hard for then employers to know who to discriminate against. So,
Well,
exactly.
exactly. Whereas at the moment, I mean, there are so many challenges, like the gender, men are paid more, and so it makes more sense for the man to stay at work in many relationships, and the employers are not sensitive to it, and they don't promote shared parental leave, and all of these little things, that add, well, they're not little, all these big things that come together, but the whole system needs to be reevaluated through the eyes of working parents, because right now it's a throwback to an outdated, patriarchal world where it was mainly just men working 9 to 5, and that is not the world that we live in
I think
anymore.
Potentially the kind of the dawn of AI might be the big disruptor that makes the difference to the workplace, in that, a lot of roles are going to disappear. The kind of social security system is going to have to change. They might have to have universal basic income and things like that. So hopefully, because there is going to be a radical shift to the way that the workplace works, this is the time to be feeding that in, because that change is coming whether we like it or not. But it could be used as like a positive catalyst for change that means the workplace then represents people in general more than just men. I say this a lot because I really mean it. Why does every job take 37 hours to do a week? Why?
It's rubbish,
silly.
isn't it? It's absolute rubbish. And until you become a mother and realise that actually, when you're a mother, it's like the most difficult job in the world, and that's what makes me so cross when mums go back after maternity leave and they're treated like, with kid gloves, and often demoted into less senior roles, and everyone just assumes that they're not as capable. It's like, excuse me, I've just pushed a baby out of my and I'm I can do 55,000 things in the 60-minute nap that my baby, like, I have learned so many project management skills. I have learned so many, I am the best multitasker there possibly is. Like, you learn so many skills when you become a mother, that are so transferable back into the workplace, and yet there's just this kind of blanket opinion that we're all just come back and we're baby brain and we don't want to work and we're work shy, and we want to have
getting a bit of
flexible
pocket
working.
money.
We want to have flexible working.
Yeah.
We're not asking for flexible working because we want to just go and sit in
spend it in
a
the spa.
Yeah, exactly.
I wish.
It's like we just want to get our kids to to their childcare settings, and then get to the office in time. We just
Like,
can't
what
be
do you
there
want
at
me to
9.
do with them? Shall I bring them in here, like for the bit of time that nursery's shut?
Exactly.
Would you like that? Shall I just bring them in and have them at my desk?
It is insane. It is insane how I mean, we spoke to another guest and she was talking about, I mean, she's now a partner at a consultancy, and she was saying how even she was demoted after coming back to work. And I think even for me, in like day to day, I realized leadership, the best leadership lessons are even before 9 a.m. Like, I've learned to like the things you like, and I mean, my son, I'm not going to nursery, but somehow we get to nursery and on time. I mean, that is leadership.
I feel like we could all have like a sideline in being hostage negotiators as a result of being mothers.
It's incredible, but I also wonder if, sadly, it's us as well. Maybe, I mean, yeah, I know society does kind of encourage it, but I wonder if also we're not kind of appreciating those skills in ourselves. So perhaps we need to make a bigger push for appreciating that motherhood is a transition into being a leader. And if we own that more, can we then kind of start this change or carry that more into how we maybe write up our resume or CVs, or, how we kind of talk about motherhood on our LinkedIn's, or, and how we describe that pause that we've taken, or to describe that shift from, into becoming a mum.
And I think as well, what I would say is we've all been women in the workplace without children before we've had them. We're the ones that know the difference between those two things, and we know we're not working. We know that wasn't like how much easier that was. We're the ones that know. When people like think staying at home is the easy option, you're like, I've done both of these things. Staying at home is pretty hard. Like, don't try and tell me that was the easy option. Like, I'm coming to work to like
take a break,
and speak to some adults. I think we are best placed to say which of these roles are more difficult, and how difficult the juggle is. Why are
Exactly.
we listening to other people on that?
Exactly. But
Yeah.
I see a lot of guilt in mothers about not just about leaving their kids to go to work, but about like just not being able to be fully present in either place, so that actually so many mums are feeling guilty for leaving their kids at home to go to work, and they're feeling guilty for being at work and not being able to
Right.
fully be present in the role because they're worrying about what's happening at home,
Pick up that nursery phone call where you have to suddenly just go, oh, sorry guys, and go and get your kid.
Yeah, the guilt is it goes both ways. It's not just that we're feeling guilty about being mothers, it's that we're feeling guilty because we don't have the capacity to deal with all the different elements of our lives and flourish in them, because of all of the barriers that we're facing. We don't want to be leaving. We don't want to be coming in late and leaving early. We don't want to be doing that. But if we can't drop the kids off until 9 and we have to pick them up at 3, then
Well, that's it. It's about the capacity. We don't have the capacity because we are not being supported by the system.
Exactly.
Like, when you look at the discrepancy between hours in the workplace and childcare and school, and then you look at summer holidays that doesn't match up with the amount of holiday you get. Like, what do you want me to do? I can't leave them at home.
Exactly, but it's just looking at the difference between men and women. It's when people challenge me on this, and it's like, well, if you just think about an average relationship, I know in my relationship, I think if my husband was saying every day that he had to drop the kids off and pick them up, he wouldn't be taken as seriously in his job, and that's the reality. That's absolutely the reality.
That is very
It'd be
true.
like one of my case studies for my book was telling me the same thing. She was saying that her husband works in, I think he works in insurance, and his colleagues were genuinely saying on Fridays, I think it's his day, or his colleagues were genuinely saying to him, can't you just get a nanny, or like, can't your wife do that?
Why
Or
can't your wife do it?
why
Yeah.
do you have to pick up the kids? And there's this genuine like these men just being like, why do you have to be involved in your children's day-to-day lives? And it's like, what?
Maybe because I want to.
Because they're 50%.
Maybe you want to.
Because they are mine as well, like. It's
And
interesting.
that's a very good point. Men, want to be more involved.
I think they do.
They do, but they are just as trapped as we are, and that's why it's so important to have this conversation together, because they are just as trapped as we are. They are trapped in this toxic masculine, narrative that they must work, provide for their families, be strong, be unemotional. All of these things which are passed on to our sons and perpetuated because we don't realize we're even doing it ourselves. But they're as trapped as we are. They want to spend more time with their kids, but they're the main earners because they have greater earning potential. Not always, but often they have a greater earning potential. It makes more sense for them to work, and if they've got a more senior job than the women, it makes more sense that they are not the ones that have their days interrupted by nursery drop-offs. And then women are then being funneled into these lower paid jobs, trying to make ends meet, and then driven out of work. I think it's Careers After Babies report says like 83% of women leave within 3 years of having babies because we just can't. We come back and we're like, I can't. It's a square peg in a round hole. I can't do this job and drop off and pick up, but I can't not because my husband's earning more than me and his job's more important, quote unquote. It's a trap.
It is a trap. And it's funny because I always say as well, my husband's career has like gone through the roof since he became a dad. And and look, I obviously love and support him, but it's true because I do kind of, if there needs flexibility needed, I will take it on. And even this morning, it was like, bad weather, I was like, no, it's fine, because I kind of understand that it probably will look bad on him, but I can get away with it because I work from home. And it got me thinking about this idea that when we have daughters, we start thinking about how we can kind of break the kind of conversation for girls around, okay, when we have a daughter, I want her to be maybe more feministy. I want her to be confident. I don't want her to kind of get into, she can do anything. I want to give her that message. I don't want to trap her in the current kind of societal thinking. But it's interesting how sometimes we might forget that for boys. And I wonder if, as much as we're raising our husbands, we should always be raising our boys to kind of think about these topics now so that they can also potentially then hopefully change the conversation further down the line. Because I have a son, and I was saying how, one of his kind of biggest aspirations at the moment is to be a dad. And I don't know where that's come from. I was like, sorry, what? I want to have 4 children. And it got me thinking about that a lot. And I thought, wow, I said to him, that's great. So I've started talking to him about like things like maybe helping around the house. He's got this little monster thing and he looks after it. And I kind of encourage him to be nurturing of that rather than, because I think sometimes we forget to teach our boys the things that we want our husbands to do now, but it's got to start early, right? So I wonder if you have any ideas for how we can maybe raise our boys also to think about the dads they want to be, or not be, right?
Yeah,
Like,
that's a good point. You know what? This is one of those areas that I find quite confronting because I sometimes look at
yeah,
my family setup, and at Christmas I was like, "Oh, I've just bought my daughter a baby Annabelle doll for Christmas and a little buggy to push her around in." And I'm like, "Oh, good, well done me for giving my daughter a doll and my son, a construction set." Like, that's fantastic. But I actually think again, it's like the rupture and repair thing. It's like
yeah.
we can still indulge the things that they're genuinely showing interest in whilst also having those conversations. When she got that doll, my son was also quite interested in the doll, so I was kind of encouraging him. We were walking back from the park one day and I was saying, would you like to feed baby Annabelle? And he was like, oh yes please. So it's kind of like, yeah, and then they go to school, right, and they get socialized, and now he doesn't want to play with dolls because he's been at school for a while, and he's like, oh god no, that's a girl thing. But it's about having those conversations. It's like you can, and I do this all the time with the kids, especially about emotions. Never be afraid to show your emotions. Never feel like, I know that you go to school and the boys are all being tough, and that's the message that they've got. But in the home, we should always be encouraging our sons to show their emotions, and making sure that they understand that they can tell us anything, and they don't have to be hard or like competitive. Competition is something that I'm really noticing coming through. My daughter hasn't started school yet, so I can't compare, but my son has become really competitive. And I don't know,
Yeah, same.
it's like he's being socialized into the need to win, which I think is a precursor to a lot of this kind of masculine.
I'm feeling this because sometimes in order to get him to do things, I'm like, I'm going to use the toilet first. He's like,
Oh dear. Oh dear.
So I do lean on that to like sometimes make things happen.
Rupture
Maybe I
and
need to
repair, don't worry.
reconsider that.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's okay.
I like pretend I'm going to run up the stairs. Use
Do
the
you know what? I'll
toilet
tell you
first.
something that happened like a couple of weeks ago. But I think we just have to be more consciously aware of the things that we're doing in the house. Because there was an incident a couple of weeks ago when my son called me. Well, he asked me to bring him something, and I said, "I'm not your slave." And he said, "Yes, you are. You're the house slave." And I was like, so appalled, so horrified and appalled. When my husband came back from work, I was like, "You need to speak to him. He's just called me the house slave." And he was like, "I think you're overreacting a bit." And I was like, "No, I am not overreacting. And you are going to go and talk to him about women's roles and man's roles and how women don't do everything around the house. And the only reason that he sees me doing so much around the house is because you're working away more. And you need to make sure that he understands that this is not a man versus woman. This is our family setup." I was so upset about it because I just thought, my God, are we showing, he's seeing me running around doing everything. My husband's away a lot, but we need to make sure he understands the context of that. Yeah. It's like when he's here, he shares everything, but what my son is seeing is that still I do most of it, and so you just have to be sure that what they're internalizing is the right messaging, whatever your setup may be. It's just important to sort of catch those messages. Anyway, he did apologize. He told me that he thought that I needed a month off, so I'll be cashing that.
Are you taking that when
I'll be cashing
that
that.
comes in?
Take it. The idea of a month off.
I know. I'll be in Hawaii for a month, soon.
But then you'd come back and they'd be thriving, so.
Yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get the month off, but yeah.
Especially now that you've written your book, you probably do need a break.
I feel like I need a break, yeah. So now I have to do like the hard bit of actually working out how to, the launch and all the PR and all that kind of stuff. So that's the next stage.
Oh, wow. What a conversation. Honestly, we could go on and on. We've covered so much. I've really enjoyed this. And I think what I'm taking away is what you said about the project manager. That really hit a nerve. Because I do always get involved, even though you don't need to. It might be a little bit more chaotic and messy than you would like it. But yeah, men can they can do it.
They can do it, and they need to do it. They need to be enabled to do it, and that's the path to a fairer and more guilt-free world for mothers.
Even just thinking about you know, I know we're wrapping up here, but the lack of guilt that I would say that my partner feels about
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff that I might feel guilt about. And
It's
maybe
insane. Yeah.
the other night we said about Tiffany's husband, what would Mark do, didn't we?
We were out. We had
That's
one
our
more drink.
inspiration. We had another drink after our little night out before going to get our transport home. And I'm gonna try and put myself in the mindset of a man more often and just be like, what would Eddie do?
But the problem with that is you then wake up feeling rubbish, and then you have
You
to go
still
straight into the responsibilities as a mother, and then you feel guilty because you're hungover and tired and cranky. It's like,
Oh, there is just no winning, is there? Oh man. It's a lot.
yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Where can our audience find you?
Probably the best place at the moment is Instagram at Flourishing Mother. I'm always on there, and yeah, there's in the links in my bio. There's links to subscribe to my mailing list, and that's probably the best thing to do if you want to find out about the book, which should be coming out in June. But I'm going to be kind of updating my mailing list as and when that happens. So probably that's the best place to find me. I am also on Facebook, The Flourishing Mother on Facebook.
You're on LinkedIn as well, aren't you? Or you don't want people
I
to?
am on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
You can find me there. I'm on most places, but yeah, I'm probably most active on Instagram at the moment. So yeah.
Okay.
Exciting.
Thank you so much, everyone. We will send you an affiliate link. Don't worry, because we gotta get some permission here as well. Oh, thanks so much for today, Belinda.
Oh, it's been
Really
lovely.
Yeah,
lovely.
thank you so much. Right, and before we hit, I can see you, Tiffany. I can see you're going to hit stop, but I'm trying to do the proper podcaster thing of, if you're enjoying our podcast, guys, please like and subscribe. Smash that like button, as Ted would
Smash
say.
the like button.
Smash the like
And
button.
tell a friend.
Follow us, review us, 5 stars only, please. And yeah, we'll speak to you next time. Thanks, guys.
Oh, thanks so much, everyone. It's been a pleasure.